They say an ASTARTES cannot truly die, that his body may break, his blood may spill, but his soul, that remains eternal. They are wrong. There are things in the warp that devour eternity. When I fell, it wasn't to chaos, it was to silence. One moment, there was war, the roar of bolters, the cry of brothers, the glory of the lion's banner. The next, there was nothing but smoke and the bitter taste of betrayal. I remember the sky of Caliban burning, the forests aflame, the angels at war with themselves, and me, a son of the lion, watching everything I believed in dissolve beneath the weight of a single terrible truth. We had been abandoned. I was struck down by my own kin, though I no longer remember whose bolt found me first. Pain fades. Regret does not. When I awoke, there was no battlefield, no light, no emperor's grace, only a sky without stars, a world between worlds. The earth beneath me was made of ash that whispered when I moved. The air carried the echo of prayers spoken centuries ago, repeating endlessly, fading into dust. And then I heard it, the voice, soft at first, almost human. You are not lost, brother, only forgotten. It came from the dark, patient, gentle, familiar. Every word sank into my mind like a memory I wished I hadn't kept. Do you know what becomes of those the Imperium casts aside? I didn't answer, because I already knew. We become echoes. We become fallen. The warp doesn't burn or scream like mortals imagine. It remembers. It keeps every failure, every unspoken doubt, every dream twisted by guilt, and feeds them back to you until you cannot tell where the god ends and you begin. Here, faith is a mirror that shows only what you've broken. I walked through that mirror willingly. At first, I sought the lion's forgiveness. Then, I sought oblivion. Neither came. Only the voice followed. Sometimes it spoke as a brother I had lost. Sometimes as the emperor I still feared. Sometimes it spoke to me. There is no redemption in eternity, son of the lion, but there is purpose in the fall. And for the first time since the day Caliban burned, I listened. But that was only the beginning, because what I found in the warp was not punishment, it was an invitation. The warp is not chaos, it is a memory. The galaxies rot distilled into thought, the echo of every prayer unanswered, every death unavenged, every hope betrayed. It remembers what we forget, and that is where I awoke. At first, I thought it was hell, a red horizon, seas of glass and bone, the shadows of angels walking across a sky made of screaming light. But then I realized, this was no punishment. It was a reflection. The warp shows you what you are, not what you were. My armor was gone. My weapons too. What remained was the weight of my oaths, each one a chain around my soul. The words burned into my mind like scripture on steel. Duty, loyalty, honor. Once, those words had been my salvation. Now, they were my curse. The voice returned, soft, steady, terrible. You thought duty would save you. You thought the lion's shadow would keep you pure. It moved through the fog like a whisper of fire. But tell me, brother, what did you serve when the banners burned? I had no answer, because the truth was simple. When Caliban fell, I did not fight for faith or for justice. I fought because I did not know how to stop. That was the first sin of a space marine, obedience without understanding. I wandered through that place for days, or centuries. Time does not move cleanly in the Imperium. The ground was littered with relics. The shattered pauldrons of ASTARTES, long dead bolters turned to rust, and books that wept blood when opened. Every artifact whispered names I had tried to forget. Each belonged to a brother, each had fallen differently. Some prayed until their minds broke, others screamed until the warp itself answered. A few, the lucky ones, simply dissolved into light. I envied them, because something in me refused to fade. Then I saw it, the first true vision. A figure in black armor standing upon a bridge of bones. His wings were made of shadow, his helm broken to reveal a face I knew but couldn't name. He looked at me and smiled. Do you see it now, brother? I stepped forward. What are you? What becomes of those who fall? He raised his hand, and the air shimmered. Behind him, I saw countless figures, all ASTARTES, once now unmade, their armor etched with scripture that writhed like veins. We are what remains when loyalty is devoured. We are the memory of betrayal, and when I looked into their faces, I realized that they were not strangers, they were all me. But that was not the end, because something behind those fallen eyes still lived, a spark untouched by the warp's corruption. Something that reminded me of duty, and the voice whispered again, soft as breath against my ear, if you cannot die, then you will serve. I should have resisted. But when the warp calls you brother, the word carries gravity. You move, not because you believe, but because belief has been burned into your marrow. The voice guided me to a plain of broken weapons, bolters, blades, relics from wars long forgotten, a mountain of faith, reduced scrap. Each one hummed faintly, alive with the echo of the warriors who'd wielded them, and at the mountain's peak stood a throne made of helmets, some still bearing the marks of the dark angels. That was when I realized. This place was built for us. The figure in black armor watched me approach. His face, half flesh and half metal, carried the patience of one who had waited too long to be forgiven. When he spoke, his voice was not cruel, it was tiring. You wonder what becomes of the fallen, he said. You think you have found death. No, death would have been mercy. He stepped down from the throne and offered me a hand. It was not a gesture of compassion, it was ownership. We are the bones that still march, he said. The Imperium forgets us, the warp devours us, but something in between remembers. I hesitate. The air around him shimmered, the colors bending like heat. For a moment, I saw what he truly was, not flesh, not daemon, but memory given shape. We are echoes, he said, but even echoes have work to do. He led me through a battlefield suspended in stillness, frozen warriors locked mid-strike, time itself bound like a held breath. This is where the dead wait, he said, not for judgment, for purpose. He knelt beside a fallen ultramarine, his blade still buried in a traitor's chest. Do you think the Emperor remembers him? I said nothing. No, he said, but the warp does. And now, so do we. He placed his hand on the corpse, and the stillness broke. The air screamed as the two bodies dissolved into light, drawn upward into the crimson sky. The sound was neither agony nor release. It was recognition. Every fallen warrior is a note, he said. We are the choir. I looked down at my hands. They were bleeding light again, the same hue as the warp's endless dawn. The figure turned to me, eyes glowing through the ruin of his helm. You will walk the battlefields between worlds, he said. You will gather the lost. You will teach them to remember. Remember what? I asked. That loyalty and damnation are the same song sung in different keys. Behind him, the frozen armies began to stir. Thousands of warriors, loyalists and traitors alike, turning their faces toward me. You are one of us now, the voice said. You will carry the weight of both heaven and hell. I wanted to refuse. I wanted to die. But instead, I knelt. Because, in that moment, for the first time since the fall of Caliban, I felt something that almost resembled purpose. They gathered where light could not reach. A congregation of echoes, marching in perfect silence. Their armor bore the marks of forgotten legions, their heraldry devoured by time. Some still carried bolters, others wielded relics so old that even the warp had begun to pity them. They were the choir of the forgotten, the unending chorus of Astartes, who had fallen beyond salvation, neither damned nor redeemed, only remembered by their sins. And now, I was among them, the one who led them. The black-armored revenant who had first spoken to me stood before a monolith carved of bone and memory. Its surface pulsed faintly, covered in names that shifted when you blinked. Every one of those names belonged to a warrior who had once believed himself eternal. He turned to me, his voice low, deliberate. This is where we serve, brother. Not for gods, not for masters, for the memory of war itself. His words were not metaphors. The choir fed the warp, not through worship, but through remembrance. Each battle they reenacted, each memory they sang, became energy for something vast and unseen. The warp was not chaos to them. It was scripture. I walked among them as they prepared for their endless ritual. Each warrior removed his helm before kneeling, exposing faces both ancient and young, eyes hollow, mouths stitched shut with runes of silence. They carried the scars of 10,000 wars, yet none of them spoke a word. Their silence was their hymn. As I passed, the revenant placed his hand on my pauldron. You were once a son of the lion. You understand penance. That is why you were chosen. Chosen? I said bitterly. To serve again? He nodded. To remember what the living forget. When the ritual began, the warp opened above us, a wound in reality bleeding light. The choir knelt as the air filled with the thunder of unseen battles. I saw visions unfold within the storm. Kalth burning, Istvan drowning in betrayal, terror besieged by its own children. They were not memories. They were moments. The choir was replaying them, feeding the gods through remembrance of pain. I felt it then, the pull of those memories clawing at my mind, demanding I contribute my own. I saw Caliban again. The fire. The lion turned away. My brothers were screaming as the ground split. The choir began to hum, a vibration so low it became feeling instead of sound. The warp rippled, feasting on our grief. And in that horror, I understood the truth. We were not punished for suffering. We were punished to remember. As the vision faded, I fell to my knees trembling. The revenant's shadow loomed over me. Now you see it, brother, he said. To fall is not to die. It is to become a memory that can never fade. He paused, then whispered almost tenderly, "Welcome to eternity." The choir sang again that cycle, but there was something different in the sound. It was not the steady pulse of grief I had heard before. It was thinner, fragmented, like a machine stuttering through a prayer it no longer believed in. And then beneath their harmony, I heard another voice. It was faint, barely a whisper, but it was not the warp. It was human. At first, I thought it was the memory of some forgotten brother, echoing through me, yet the tone was too clear, the cadence too deliberate. It cut through the noise of the warp, like a blade through smoke. "You remember what you were, don't you?" The voice came from nowhere, everywhere. I turned, scanning the black horizon. Around me, the choir remained kneeling, their eyes closed, their hymn unwavering. "You were made to protect, not to mourn," it said again, softer. "Do you remember the lion's vow?" I froze. That word lion. None of the choir ever spoke his name. In the next instant the fog shifted, and through the warp storm I saw him, a figure standing alone in the distance, clad in broken green armor. His pauldrons still bore the insignia of the First Legion. His head was bare, his hair gray, his eyes hollow but alive. "You are not lost," he said. "Not yet." I wanted to move toward him, but the ground itself resisted, the warp pulling at my legs like wet chains. The choir's song grew louder, suffocating, desperate. "You cannot listen," shouted the revenant commander, his voice a thunderclap through the storm. "That voice is deception." But I knew the difference. The warp whispers in temptation, in hunger. This voice spoke in memory. I tore free from the circle, stumbling toward the apparition. Each step made the air shatter, echoes of my past flickering around me, my brothers training in the shadow of Caliban's spires, the roar of the lion's blade drawn in judgment. The day the world broke. The figure raised his hand. "Do you see now, brother? You were never meant to serve the echoes. You were meant to wake them." "What are you?" I demanded. He smiled sadly. "A fragment of what the Emperor left behind in all of you, the spark of purpose the warp cannot erase." Behind me the choir screamed as one. Their voices merged into a single word that shook the ground. "Heresy." The revenant lunged through the mist, blade drawn. The figure before me only said, "Choose." I turned between them, between the godless choir that wanted me silent and the memory that wanted me awake. The blade fell, the mist burned, and I realized that to fall was not damnation. It was a second chance. When the blade fell, it did not cut me. It struck the ground, and the warp screamed. The choir's song broke into chaos, thousands of voices turning from harmony to panic. The air filled with static and blood. The revenant's eyes blazed like dying suns. He tried to lift his weapon again, but the mist had turned to fire, and the fire had turned to memory. Every face I had ever known appeared around me. Brothers, commanders, serfs, even the lion himself. Not visions, not ghosts, just reflections, fragments drawn from my own soul, and they were all watching. The figure in green armor, my fragment, my conscience, my ghost, spoke again. You see what they are now, don't you? I turned, and the choir's members were no longer warriors. Their armor had melted away, revealing hollow shells filled with writhing light, souls without identity, soldiers whose faith had been stolen by the lie of eternal purpose. They remember war, but not why they fought, the voice said. They serve memory itself, not meaning. They think remembrance is redemption. The revenant roared and charged, his blade leaving trails of crimson light through the void. His voice was a thunderclap of rage. You would destroy the only order left in damnation. I would free them. Our blades met, though I had no sword. I raised my arm, and the air itself became steel, forged by the will of what still lived inside me. The clash shook the ground. He was stronger. He always had been.
The weight of countless ages drove his strikes, each one echoing with the power of faith turned sour. But I no longer fought for faith. I fought for something smaller. Choice. Every blow he struck, I saw fragments of the man he'd once been, a brother kneeling in the cathedrals of Caliban, swearing the oaths I once believed unbreakable. He wasn't evil. He was obedient.
And obedience, I realized, was what had doomed us all. We forgot how to doubt, I said. We forgot how to fear. He hesitated, the point of his blade lowering. The light from the mist reflected across his helm, illuminating the cracks in his armor and the hesitation in his soul. Fear, he whispered. Yes, I said. The Emperor made us perfect soldiers, but he never wanted perfect machines. The ground split beneath us. The choir screamed again, their forms unraveling into light as the fire spread. The revenant looked around as the world he ruled began to die. What have you done? I remembered what it means to fall. The light consumed everything. Voices, faces, worlds, and through the fire, the green armored figure smiled once more. Now you understand. Then he was gone. When the light faded, I was alone in silence. The choir was no more. The warp was still, and in that silence, I finally felt it. The heartbeat of something alive within me. I awoke beneath a broken sky. It wasn't the warp. I could feel the weight of gravity again, the bite of real air in my lungs. The scent was familiar, ash, ozone, and rot. A battlefield. The stars above were real, cold, and uncaring. I had returned to the Imperium, but the Imperium I found was not the one I had left. The ground was littered with bodies, Astra Militarum troopers, their faces turned to glass from the heat of plasma fire. A shattered banner hung limply nearby, its aquila half melted. The air was thick with silence, that dreadful quiet that follows a war too brutal to leave witnesses. I pushed myself up, my limbs heavier than they should have been. My armor was black now, etched with symbols I didn't recognize. Some glowed faintly, alive with dull red light, as though remembering what they once protected me from. A name echoed through my mind. Unbidden. Caliban. I stumbled forward, every step sinking into the mud. My memories came in fragments, fire, screams, the choir's final song, the light that tore me free. I remembered the revenant's face, the words, "You will wake them." Wake who? The dead? Lost? Myself? That question haunted me more than any daemon. As I crested a ridge, I saw them, an Imperial patrol, a squad of black-armored ASTARTES moving through the ruins, their banners bearing the winged sword of the unforgiven. The dark angels. My brothers, they didn't see me at first. I might have hidden. I should have, but I'd spent too long running from my own reflection. I stepped into their path. The nearest warrior raised his bolter instantly, his voice sharp and mechanical through the vox. Identify yourself. I tried to speak my name, but the words failed, the one who led them. His armor dark green and heavy with purity seals, studied me for a long silent moment. By the throne, he murmured, "It can't be." He stepped closer. Fallen. The word struck harder than any blade. Not as an insult, as recognition. I didn't resist when they bound my hands. The chains hummed faintly with hexagrammic wards, cold enough to burn. They took me aboard their strike cruiser, the Interemptor's Vigil, and locked me in a chamber of stone and silence. No interrogator came, no blade, no catechism, only the hum of the ship's reactor, and the faint whisper of the warp beyond its hull. Days passed, or hours. Then the door opened. A robed figure stepped through. His face was hidden, his voice soft, patient, familiar. "Do you know why you're still alive?" I looked up at him and saw the faintest glimmer of green beneath his hood. "Because the lion still remembers you." They took me to the rock. Not as a brother, not as a prisoner. Something between. Something unclean. The corridors of that fortress monastery were exactly as I remembered from dreams. Endless stone, dark and reverent, lit by the glow of votive candles burning in numbers too vast to count. Each flame represented a sin, confessed or denied. And still, the air was cold. When they removed my chains, the silence hurt more than the metal ever did. I was led through the Hall of Angels, past statues whose eyes seemed to follow me. I recognized some of those faces, old brothers, heroes, ghosts of a time when loyalty was as simple as breathing. Now, their stone mouths seemed to whisper lies. The interrogator chaplain, who stood before me, wore black robes lined with scripture. His crozius rested against the floor like a judge's gavel waiting for its sentence. "You know where you stand, brother," he said, "between the emperor's memory and the lion's shame." "I am neither," I replied. "I am only what remains." He studied me for a long moment. "Then tell me," he said quietly, "what becomes of a fallen ASTARTES?" I almost laughed. "You're asking the wrong man. Ask the galaxy." "I'm asking you." The chamber's lights dimmed as he stepped closer. "We know what the warp does to mortals. We know what chaos makes of men, but what does the warp make of you?" I hesitated, because I knew the answer. "It makes us remember," I said. "Every sin, every command obeyed without question, every lie we told ourselves about duty, and it makes us wish we could forget." He nodded, slowly. "Then perhaps that is your penance." He motioned, and the doors opened. Two dark angels entered, carrying relics of black iron and bone. Between them, a throne ornate, terrible, the seat of contrition. No torture device in the galaxy rivaled it. It did not break flesh, it peeled back memories. "Sit," the chaplain ordered. I did. When the restraints closed, they weren't metal, they were thought, binding my mind instead of my body. The lights dimmed further, and a whisper filled the chamber, the same hum I'd heard in the warp, but colder, stripped of its divine pretense. "Confess." I saw Caliban again. The forests are burning, the lion's shadow swallowed by fire. I saw brothers tearing each other apart under banners they once swore to protect. And then, I saw myself, kneeling before that revenant of the warp, accepting his hand. "You served memory," the whisper said. "Do you still?" "I serve the truth," I whispered back. The crozier struck the floor once. The sound was like thunder inside my skull. "Then speak it," said the chaplain, "before it consumes you again." But I couldn't, because I knew the truth they feared most. That is what the Imperium calls redemption, is just another word for obedience. They didn't stop when I fell silent. They never do. The seat of contrition is not made for pain. It's made for clarity. The machine around me hissed with psionic resonance. each pulse burrowing into memory, unearthing every secret I'd ever buried beneath discipline. Images crashed through me in waves. Brothers laughing in the halls of the Lion, the first time I raised a blade in his name, the moment I realized we were not warriors of faith, but tools of fear. And then, Caliban. Always, Caliban. The chaplain circled me like a vulture in scripture. You remember much, he said, but not the right things. Tell me, brother, when the lion struck down Luther, where were you? I was dying, I said, like all of us. Then you saw it. I saw a god and a man break each other's hearts. He slammed the Crozius into the stone. Sparks of psychic force rippled through my skull. Blasphemy. No, I said softly. Memory. The machine groaned as it peeled further. Voices began to whisper inside my skull. Familiar ones. The brothers I'd fought beside. The voices of those who fell into the warp and those who refused to follow. They spoke over one another, until I could no longer tell which side they belonged to. We were loyal. We were betrayed. We were never either. I laughed, and the sound frightened even me. The chaplain leaned closer, his breath cold through his vox grill. You fell. You are anathema. Yet the lion did not destroy you. Why? The answer burned behind my teeth. Because he couldn't. Because the lion had seen himself in every one of us who fell. I met the chaplain's gaze, his eyes two shards of green fire. He spared us, I said, because he understood that we didn't fall from faith. We fell for it. We were too loyal to the lie. He froze. The machine hissed louder, the energy rising to a scream. Would you claim the lion's guilt as virtue? No, I whispered. I claim it as truth. The Crozius struck again. Pain exploded behind my eyes, but I did not yield. I would not. Not this time. The chamber began to flicker, the candles dimmed. I smelled smoke, ozone, and something deeper. The taste of the warp pressing against reality's walls. Then came the voice again. Not the chaplain's, not mine. Faint. Familiar. Do you see now, brother? The Imperium needs its sinners. Without them, it cannot remember why it prays. The chaplain's Crozius froze mid-swing. His eyes widened. He had heard it too. And then the machine failed. The light died. The seat of contrition split open like a tomb. I fell forward onto the stone, gasping, free at last. The chaplain stared down at me, trembling. What was that voice? I smiled, blood dripping from my mouth. Redemption, I said, yours or mine. I don't know yet. The rock trembled that night, not from war, but from doubt. The walls themselves seemed to recoil from what had been spoken in the chamber. Word spreads quickly among Astartes, even when forbidden. By the next watch, whispers ran through the fortress like blood through a wound. A fallen had confessed without heresy. A chaplain had heard a voice that was not his own, and the lion's silence lingered. They moved me to a smaller cell, less chains, more observation. A priest of the reclusium stood guard outside, never speaking, never blinking. I could feel the tension in his stance. He feared what I represented, not corruption, not madness, possibility. Because if I was not damned, then what were they? The chaplain who'd interrogated me, Master Saphoriel, did not return for 3 days. When he finally entered, his armor looked heavier, as though burdened by revelation. He placed the Crozius on the table between us, its head flickering faintly with residual light. That voice we heard, he began. You claim it was redemption. I don't claim anything, I said. I only know it spoke the truth. Truth is subjective in the warp. Then perhaps we've spent 10,000 years worshipping the wrong kind of certainty. He didn't strike me for the blasphemy. That more than anything told me he'd begun to doubt. The lion sleeps, he murmured. And in his absence, the unforgiven carry his penance. We hunt the fallen to atone for our own fracture. He looked at me, his voice softening. But if you are not corrupted, if you found something within the warp, I didn't find peace, I said. Only understanding. The warp didn't forgive me, it reminded me. He flinched at that word, remembered. Yes, the warp doesn't lie, Chaplain. It only reflects. What you see there depends on what you bring into it. His eyes dimmed with something I hadn't seen in a dark angel for centuries. Sorrow. And what did you bring? Loyalty, I said. That was my sin. He stood in silence for a long while, then reached into his robes and withdrew a data sigil, a sealed transmission meant for the inner circle. He placed it beside the Crozius. They will not understand, he said. They will want to destroy you, perhaps me as well. I smiled faintly. Then we are finally brothers again. He almost laughed. Almost. You've changed. No, I said. You're just beginning to see. He turned to leave, pausing at the threshold. What do you want, brother? I looked past him, at the dark stone walls that had entombed too many confessions. I want the lion to wake up, I said, and tell us what he really meant by forgiveness. Master Safaril returned at midnight. The chapel's bells had long since ceased their morning tone. Yet the halls still whispered with unease. He wore no armor this time, only robes of plain gray, as if the act of shedding his ceramite could make him human again. He didn't speak as he led me down the old passageways beneath the rock. I followed in silence, the echo of our boots carried by the cathedral's hollow lungs. Every archway we passed was marked with the sigils of secrecy, the ones even chaplains feared to recite. I knew where we were going. The vaults of the first sin. We stopped before a great door carved from the bones of some extinct leviathan. Its surface pulsed faintly, veins of starlight threading through it. Safaril placed his hand upon the lock, and it responded with a sound like a sigh. What you will see, he said, few have survived to describe. But after what I heard in that chamber, I can no longer bury this. The door opened, not outward but inward, like a wound parting. Beyond it lay a single hall, silent, infinite, lined with stasis fields. Within each field floated a figure in black power armor. The fallen, not dead, not alive. Waiting. There were hundreds of them. Thousands, perhaps. Each held frozen in a moment of surrender. A moment the rock had refused to let end. Safaril's voice was low. They told us the fallen was scattered, hunted, purged. But the truth is simpler. The rock keeps what the Imperium cannot admit exists. He looked at me then, not as an inquisitor, not as an ASTARTES, but as a man asking forgiveness he knew he didn't deserve. The lion decreed that no brother is ever truly lost. That was his greatest mercy, and his deepest curse. He walked among the suspended forms, each one glowing faintly within its cell of light. They told us you were traitors, he said. That if all of you fell, then who was left to be loyal? We reached the final chamber, sealed by wards of the old tongue. Inside, a single sarcophagus stood larger than the rest, wrapped in chains of stasis energy. The name carved into its side had been struck out by a blade, but I didn't need to read it. I knew that shape. The lion, I whispered. Safaril nodded slowly. He sleeps, yes, but not by choice. The truth of the fall, it is bound to his awakening. And when he rises, brother, we will all stand judgment again. I stared at the sarcophagus, the faint pulse of life within it, like a heartbeat caught between seconds. Then perhaps, I said quietly, he already dreams of us. Safaril turned toward me. Then may he never wake. The air inside the vault thickened. At first, it was only a whisper, the faint hum of power cycling through the stasis fields. But as we stood before the sarcophagus, that hum began to deepen, like a heartbeat stirring after centuries of stillness. Dust fell from the ceiling, the light in the chamber dimmed, pulsing in rhythm with the sound. Each of the stasis cells flickered once, briefly, as if their occupants had felt something. Safaril froze. His hand hovered above his Crozius. No one touches the chamber, he said, his voice a whisper that didn't trust itself. It should not respond, but it did. The sarcophagus groaned. The chains of stasis energy stretched, crackling with psychic resistance. The runes of silence carved into the floor began to glow, not white but a dull crimson bleeding color, into the stone. And then, we both heard it. A voice. My sons. Not through air, not through vox, through the warp. Saphoriel dropped to his knees instantly, his armor clattering against the stone. I could not move. I had waited millennia for that voice, the one that had haunted every fragment of my loyalty and every echo of my damnation. It was the lion, but it was wrong. Not weak, not corrupted, just aware. You remember too much, the voice said. You've learned to question, to doubt. That was your second fall. I stepped closer to the sarcophagus. The light spilling from its seams washed over me, warm, golden, but there was sorrow beneath it, and something like accusation. My lord, I whispered, we never meant to. You meant everything you did. The lion's voice cut through. You chose to see me as a man, not a myth. That is why you broke. That is why I bound you here. Saphoriel raised his head, trembling. My Primarch. Then the rock. This prison is of your design. The voice softened. No, it is your fault. The chains tightened again, not in rage but restraint, as if the being within was holding itself back. I saw images flashing across the surface of the stasis field. Caliban's forests, the darkened stars, the moment of betrayal replayed in loops of fire and regret. If I wake, the voice said, truth wakes with me, and truth, Saphoriel, will end you. The chamber shuddered. One of the stasis fields cracked, spilling white light into the air. The fallen within vanished, reduced to motes of dust. He's consuming them, Saphoriel gasped, reclaiming them into himself. I felt it too. That pull, that same divine gravity I'd known in life. The weight of his gaze pressing through eternity. It wanted me back. Not my body, not my faith, but my memory. And at that moment, I understood. The lion's sleep was not imprisonment. It was containment. The rock didn't hold the fallen. It held him. And now, he was waking. The rock groaned like a dying world. Every lumen flickered. Every rune screamed static. And somewhere deep beneath the cathedrals of the First Legion, the impossible heartbeat of a Primarch began to echo through the walls. The vaults trembled, shedding centuries of dust as though creation itself remembered how to breathe again. Saphoriel stumbled backward from the sarcophagus, his eyes wide with reverence and dread. It cannot be, he gasped. The lion is not meant to wake. I finished for him. He already has. The light from the sarcophagus wasn't warm anymore. It turned cold, not lifeless, but pure, clinical, stripping the shadows from the corners of the vault. For a heartbeat I thought I saw him through the veil of the stasis field. The lion L. Johnson, still and terrible, his features caught between serenity and fury, but the voice that filled the chamber was not his alone. You've forgotten the purpose of obedience. You've mistaken silence for penance. And you call yourselves unforgiven. The words struck like blows. They weren't spoken. They were remembered into existence. Every warrior of the rock felt them. I knew. Every penitent brother kneeling in the reclusum suddenly understood that their prayers were being answered, not by mercy but by judgment. Saphoriel fell to his knees again, his voice trembling. My lord, we have kept your vigil. We have preserved your memory. The light flared almost angrily. You preserved the lie. You hunted your brothers not for justice, but for comfort. And then, quieter, you feared what I became. The stasis seals fractured, each rune shattering in a burst of blue fire. The air turned to thunder. The sarcophagus split. What stepped from it was not entirely the lion. His armor was black, veined with gold that moved like liquid across its surface. His mane of hair was gone, replaced by a faint corona of light, not radiant but electric, shifting between reality and the Imperium. His eyes were twin suns behind the fog of ages, and in them was sorrow deeper than the warp. So much blood, he said, looking upon us both. So much faith in my absence. He turned his gaze to me. You, the one they call fallen. The words burned through my skull. My knees buckled beneath the weight of them. You are my sin-given thought. I dared to speak, and yet you still dream of me. He smiled. a slow, broken thing that held both love and horror. I dream of all my sons. The walls cracked as if the rock itself recoiled. The lion raised his hand, and from the sarcophagus spilled a tide of psychic light, sweeping outward, dissolving the barrier between real space and the warp. Every fallen in stasis screamed as their containment fields failed. Sarthoriel turned to me, his voice drowned by thunder. He's merging the realms. He'll destroy everything. I looked into the light and saw the lion's eyes staring through me, past me, into something beyond, and I realized then that this was not resurrection. It was an absolution, the kind that kills gods and sons alike. The light devoured the vault. Not like fire, not like the warp. It was the truth, raw, blinding, merciless. Every wall of the rock, every cathedral, every hidden passage screamed with memory. I saw it all at once. The battles we'd fought, the brothers we'd slain, the oaths whispered in fear of our own reflection. The Imperium itself unfolded before me, not as a realm, but as a wound dressed in prayer. The lion stood at its center, haloed in golden fire that hurt to look at. His shadow split across the chamber like cracks in glass, reaching for everything, consuming everything. Sarthoriel staggered to his feet, shouting through the roar, "My lord, stop!
You'll unmake the rock."
The lion turned slowly, his expression unreadable. The rock was never meant to last. It was built from sin. The stasis fields ruptured one by one. Every fallen suspended within them began to awaken, not as men but as silhouettes of light and sorrow. They screamed without sound, their souls caught between reality and the warp's memory. "My sons." The lion's voice cracked. "I dreamed you'd be free." Sarthoriel raised his crozius, desperate. "They're not your sons anymore." He charged, foolish, brave, doomed. The moment his weapon met the lion's aura, it shattered into a storm of sparks. The Primarch looked at him with an almost paternal sadness. "You still don't understand." He reached out and touched Sarthoriel's helm. The chaplain froze, every servo locking, every rune flaring with divine energy. Then, in a single heartbeat, he dissolved into dust, not obliterated, remembered out of existence. The light drifted away like ashes. "Faith without understanding," the lion whispered, "is the purest form of ignorance." I was the last one left standing. The fallen howled, as their forms flickered between man and spirit. The walls melted into light, the floor into clouds. The warp was bleeding through, and the lion was becoming something it could recognize, not God, not man, but both. I took a step forward, my voice breaking. "Father, stop, you'll destroy us all." He turned to me, and for the first time I saw pain in his eyes. Real pain. "I tried to save you," he said. "All of you. But every act of mercy became another lie." His hand trembled as he reached out. I could feel the pull, the same irresistible gravity that had once made legions kneel. "Let me make it right." I shook my head. "You can't. We're beyond right." The lion's glow flared brighter. "Then what are you?" "Fallen," I said, still falling, but not lost. The light dimmed for a heartbeat. His expression softened. "Not forgiveness, not regret. Recognition. Then finish it, my son." He knelt. The Lion L. Johnson, Primarch of the First Legion, bowed before the very sin he had tried to erase. And for the first time since Caliban burned, I understood what he was asking. He didn't want salvation. He wanted release. The chamber was gone. The rock was gone. Only the light remained. Blinding, endless, alive. The warp and the Materium folded into one another like waves of the same sea, and I stood at their meeting point, a mortal caught between God and memory. The lion knelt before me, the fire of his being flickering like a dying sun. His armor wept molten gold. His eyes, though still burning, no longer saw. He was slipping between the worlds, between the man he had been and the thing he was becoming. "Do it," he said, "before I forget who I am." His voice wasn't a command, it was a plea, the voice of a father begging his son to end his suffering. I reached for my blade, rusted, broken, the weapon of a ghost who had no right to wield judgment. The closer I came, the heavier it grew. The lion's light pressed down upon me like the weight of an entire legion's guilt. Every step forward was agony, every breath, defiance. Around us, the fallen screamed, not in pain, but in remembrance. Their souls, drawn into the storm of his rebirth, cried out as fragments of who they once were. Knights, warriors, brothers, echoed across eternity. And in that chorus of ghosts, I heard myself. I remembered laughter in the training halls of Caliban. I remembered the oath I'd taken to the lion, to guard mankind, not to rule it. And I remembered the moment that oath broke. You were the first to doubt me, he said. I was the first to understand you, I answered. You wanted perfection from men born to fail. The light flared, pain and pride tangled within it. Then teach me, son of the fall, what is the lesson of imperfection? I raised the blade, that even gods must die to be remembered as men. The strike was silent. The blade entered light and met resistance, not flesh, not armor, but memory itself. The lion's eyes widened, not in fear, but in peace. His hand closed around mine, guiding the blade deeper, his voice soft and clear through the storm. Forgive me. The light consumed him, then the world, then me. For a moment, there was only the sound of wind, and then silence. When I awoke, I was lying in the ruins of the rock. The stars above were cold again. The sarcophagus was empty. Saphoriel's Crozius lay beside me, cracked but whole. No sign of the lion. No sign of the choir. No sign of the god. Only the faint hum beneath the stone. The heartbeat of something vast and distant. No longer sleeping. No longer divine. I rose, and for the first time, felt light without warmth. So this is redemption, I said to the silence. And from the void, faint and infinite, the lion's voice answered, no, my son, this is remembrance. In the end, a fallen Astartes does not die, nor is he damned. He becomes a story the galaxy cannot forget. A scar that refuses to heal, a memory that bleeds. And in a universe that worships silence, to be remembered is the closest thing to salvation.